Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over the market. Let's talk about what happened today with Tesla stock. We got the reveal of the new Model Y and 3. Bit of an anticlimactic reveal. The market obviously not very happy with the Tesla down 4.5%, but I'll give you my thoughts moving forward. So if you enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., well, again, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day as the market's open and trading from morning until close, essentially. So yeah, check it out if you're interested. The link is down below in the description of the video. It's the first link. Just click that. You can have the options to join for $3 a month. You get all my updates on Tesla stock and the broader market. $5 a month includes NVDA. $7 a month, of course, also includes everything else. Private access to Discord. We have a chat room for tier 3 members. People day trade there, post their thoughts. I do chart requests with members every single Sunday, and you get all my posts. You can kind of see one in the background for Duolingo. You get all my posts for other stocks in the market that I see something that's setting up potentially nicely for a trade. So yeah, love to have you there. Definitely check it out if you're interested. But yeah, Tesla again down 4.5% today, down to $433 per share, right? So yesterday I mentioned how we could go up to 460, right? That was kind of my upper target, right? Those are the Fibonacci's I mentioned, and I mentioned how I personally view this as a dead cat, right? Because we did break some technical levels, we did break some lower lows, and this, whether it was a 618 around 450 or the green fibs up here, this was dead cat potential, right? Technically 0.5 Fibonacci at the 445. It doesn't matter. One of those levels is usually enough, right? You don't know which one. Nobody knows which one, but one of them, right? And again, I view this as a dead cat because, well, just the structure was damaged. The structure was damaged. And unfortunately, it's still damaged. And I actually think there could still be more downside. But I actually think this potential downside that might be coming up, which I'll go over more in the daily, is actually going to be starting to slowly set up for something pretty bullish. So I'll give you my thoughts, right? So we had the rejection, right? We ended up getting a nice rally. We didn't get too much higher. We kind of consolidated for quite some time, held at an important level around 435, and then we kind of closed down below it. And you can see we turned it into, if I remove these Fibonacci's, right? You can see this level was acting as a support down here, and then we closed down below it. And then you can see the final 30 minutes or so is a resistance, right? So, this is showing that this breakdown is most likely legitimate, right? The next level to the downside I've been looking for is the gap fill down here at around 430, down to the key level near the 420s, the low 420s. Those are the main levels that I'll be looking for kind of on the shorter term. We can definitely get a bounce off of one of these two levels, a small bounce in my opinion, back to this trendline resistance. But I do think further downside is, I don't want to use the word likely, but I'll give you my ideal scenario that I see on the daily chart very, very soon. Now, yesterday, a lot of people had to remove comments because they're just so annoying, I'll be honest, right? People were very upset that I was calling it a dead cat. They were saying my video on Friday aged very poorly because I called for 445 and the stock went to 453. So the stock went about 1.5% higher than I thought, and suddenly my video aged poorly. Guys, if you're going to write 5 IQ comments, please just keep them to yourself. It literally takes me like 2 seconds to remove them. For everyone's sake, trust me, I'm doing you a favor. You don't want to read those comments. They have to be AI. I'll be shocked if they're not AI. I'd be concerned if those are real people typing those comments. But the bigger picture that I look at on the daily here is the fact that I do believe we're actually setting up a bullish pattern, right? I do believe that, the short term, like I mentioned on, I think it was actually Friday. Yeah, it was Friday, right? On Friday, I mentioned how I was short term bullish, right? Remember, we broke this trend line. I mentioned, right? We broke this trend line and then we continued higher, right? Which is good. And that played out. But I mentioned how it was kind of medium term. What does medium term even mean, right? It feels like it means something different for everyone, but short term bullish into kind of medium term ish bearish, which is kind of what I believe starting to see come to fruition right now, which is where the daily comes in, right? This is what I see on the daily, right? Now, to me, the most ideal scenario, again, this is just me kind of giving you what I would like to happen, right? It doesn't necessarily mean this will obviously happen. Nobody knows what's obviously going to happen, but if I were to kind of think ahead a week, let's say maybe, or something like that, right? Maybe the rest of this week, early next week, whatever. If I were to kind of create the perfect setup that I would like to see, it would be this, right? It would be this. This is kind of like a bull flag setting up. I actually view this as a bull flag. I would like to see the volume continue to decrease personally. So if we continue selling off down to my target actually is about 410, 412, something like that. Essentially this trend line right here, this trend line that's supporting price here, and now we can get another supportive price here, which I think will bounce off of very nicely actually. That is what I want to see on declining volume ideally. If we can see that, we could be in a bit of a nice situation here from a bullish perspective, right? That's what I would be looking at right now. Now, if I start acting bullish, if we do come down here and I start saying bullish things and I see people upset that I'm not bearish or that I'm always bullish or something like that, then I know we rock it. Because usually when I say something bearish and people always complain about it being that it should be bullish, we usually do the opposite, right? It's good to use the comment sometimes as like an opposite indicator, right? It's very surprisingly powerful, to be completely honest with you. But I do see strong support coming in. Now, the reason why I want to see this 410, like I said, we have this trendline support. I do view this kind of like as a, nice little bull flag potentially setting up here, which, one more touch to the downside and then we rip higher. That's kind of my like ideal scenario. Obviously, it can fall apart. For instance, if we lose this trend line, then this bull flag can potentially get substantially longer, but we also get a lot more pain, which at that point, I think going back down closer to 370s to 360s is unfortunately the situation we'll be in. But that's obviously one of those things where, that's not something I expect until proven. And essentially, I would need to get, in order for that to be something that seems to be like it'll happen, is essentially a loss of this trend line. But we have a lot of support under us, right? We do have a lot of support under us. Now, another reason why I like this setup a lot, actually, is because right now, I actually do think a lot of people are waiting for this gap fill at about 395 to buy. People want to see 400 or sub 400s, right? Like 390s. I think a lot of people right now are waiting for that to buy. But the people that are still in the stock, the people that are still holding on right here, guess where their stop loss is most likely at, right? I mean, I know for sure if I was still in the stock right now, from a trading perspective, of course, I have long-term shares. That's a whole different, I don't really care about those shares. I don't really think about them, to be honest. But from a trading perspective, if I was in the stock, if I was buying it, like, around here, my stop loss 100% would be either the low of this low right here or this candle right here, right? Just slightly below that, which is about 416. 420, right? I'll put it maybe a couple smidges below that. So let's say if my stop loss was this candle here, I'll probably maybe put it at like what, 414, something like that, right? Give you a little bit of wiggle room. But that's exactly where the market wants to scoop up those shares, right? Because everyone has their stop losses right here, right around here. And guess where this trend line is? Just a few dollars below that, like $5 below that. So trigger everyone's stop loss. So everyone that's in it gets stopped out. And it doesn't get low enough for everyone waiting for essentially just sub 400 to buy in. Perfect sweet spot to then bounce higher. That is like the ideal scenario. Now, all the people that got stopped out and all the people that were waiting down here are now chasing it higher from like FOMO, essentially. That to me is like the perfect recipe. Now, again, this is me kind of, I'm going like really in depth into what I think is going to happen and, getting very specific. So obviously this is just take it with a grain of salt. I'm just kind of giving you my ideal scenario. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to play out, but again, if I were to orchestrate this and if I was someone that can control the markets and I want to like screw as many people over as possible, that's exactly what I would be doing, right? So let's continue monitoring this, guys. Let's see how it actually plays out. Let's see how the stock actually reacts tomorrow to the news that came out regarding this, the cheaper models, etc. But the easiest way of thinking about it, though, because again, we don't always go down to those lower targets like I want, right? Whatever, that doesn't happen. But the easiest way of looking at it is just this trend line right here, right? You have to understand, whenever a stock is in an uptrend, the only trend line that matters usually is the bottom trend line, right? Because that's what we bounce off of. That's what we're bouncing off of. And that's, when it's lost, that's when we have, those problems, right? And the flip side, when a stock is downtrending like this, the only trend line that really matters is the upper trend line because, well, that's the one that needs to get broken out to, resume trend to the opposite direction. Same idea, right? So that's why the bottom trend line, yeah, it's there to kind of give you an idea of, what the setup can kind of roughly look like. But the one that really matters is this upper trend line, right? Because once this upper trend line is broken, once this upper trend line is, broken, essentially, that's when, we have bullishness essentially returning to the stock, right? So for instance, we have candles here. Let's say we had a candle here that rejected, and then we finally break above that trend line and we break above the high of that candle. That's a bullish signal, right? And that's kind of how you want to trade. A good example I can give you, well, sort of, it's not the best example because it gapped up, which I'm not a huge fan of, but ASTS is a pretty good one, right? I actually missed this setup. I was very sad about this, but this is kind of actually what I'm looking at for Tesla stock, right? It's just, the principle is similar where, massive rally and Tesla's kind of, right around here right now. And then it kind of, reset back into the EMAs. I mean, this setup was a little cleaner to be honest, but still, the point I'm trying to make is, and then it broke out, it broke this candle's high, broke this trend line. And this was your entry right here. And then you had higher, right? That's kind of the ideal scenario. And that's, again, this is roughly what I'm looking at for Tesla stock. Maybe I can think of another stock that did something like this. I'm sure there was others. UNH actually is a pretty good one, right? UNH is a pretty decent one. Same idea, both times, right? I'm just giving you an idea as to what I'm looking for. Downward trend line, consolidation, lower volume, broke above the trend line, broke this candle's high, went higher, right? It's the same setup. It's literally the same setup every single time. And this is exactly the thing I'm looking at on Tesla stock right now moving forward. And that's kind of what I'm expecting. So let's, again, it requires patience, unfortunately, right? You're not going to be entering this, a trade like this every single day. It requires patience to wait for those pretty nice damn looking setups, like A+ setups to be presented, right? To wait for that trigger point, to wait for that entry. And that's essentially what I'm looking at for Tesla stock in the potential coming days, maybe even a couple of weeks. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'd be surprised if it takes more than a week to fill this out and then, ultimately break out. But again, let's see, guys. Let's see. But that's my overall perspective right now. And then the final thing is, of course, the weekly. If we do come down to those, to that low, again, 410 ish, right? That's not going to be exactly to the 9 EMA, but pretty damn close, guys. Pretty damn close. Like if it comes to 410, that's only going to be about 3% away from the 9 EMA, which, Tesla stock has a tendency of, especially when it really wants to start, to get going, it has a tendency to get close, but not exactly to the 9 EMA, but close, and then continue rallying. And that's kind of that more bullish scenario where we don't have to exactly touch the 9 EMA, but we're also at least not going to be this far away from it. Now we're still 8% away, but up here we were 12% away from it. You get what I'm trying to say? It's just the closer we are to the 9 EMA on the weekly, the better the risk reward, right? It's just that simple, right? It's really just that simple. So again, hopefully this all makes sense. And the final thing I'll talk about very quickly before I go to before I end off the video is going to be the broader market and the VIX. Now the VIX is getting some life in it, right? So I actually wouldn't be surprised if the VIX gets a pop above 17.5, 17.6, because you can see the VIX is starting to kind of, rotate into a bit of a bullish scenario here, right? A bit of a rounding bottom type scenario here. I really wouldn't be surprised if the VIX rallies up to closer to 20, honestly, maybe even this week, to be completely honest, which could be what causes the market to sell off, Tesla to come down to 410, for instance, etc., because it is looking kind of bullish. I actually mentioned to my members yesterday, I don't know where it is. I actually mentioned in the tier 3 chat room yesterday that I do think it's going to be spiking very, very soon. I don't know where it is. Whatever, you believe me, I'm sure. It's in my Discord. It's there somewhere. You can search for it if you don't believe me. It's there. I mentioned it yesterday at like 7 p.m. or something like that, that I think the VIX looking like it wants to pop. It already got a pop today, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get maybe a bit more of a pop, right? Again, a little bit higher. You can see the EMAs are, kind of, going to bullish mode now, right? So the VIX looks like it wants to pop, right? Which again, could be bad for the markets. But with that being said, as long as SPY, it's currently holding the 9 EMA, but, if we get a drop lower, I think the low 660s is still pretty good for SPY, because we'll still have the 21 EMA sitting at 662. We still have the rising trend line. And, if people start panicking, if the market drops another almost 1%, people will panic. I mean, we're in a mode right now where any drop in the market, people start calling for a bear market. It is what it is, which to me tells me the fact that unless we start losing like some pretty key levels, like the 21 EMA and pretty much that low 660s, there's a good chance that we just get a dip and rip, right? Until proven otherwise, obviously. So let's continue monitoring that. Let's see how this actually plays out. But that's kind of what I got right now for SPY, VIX, Tesla, and my overall perspective on the market. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.